It's a comedy of errors, but it's not very funny. People shoot heroin on the street and the police walk by. Those who don't want to shoot heroin on the street can do so in a taxpayer-funded, safe heroin injection site under government supervision. And meanwhile, a toddler is pricked by a dirty needle on the playground. Areas that were recently green spaces along highways are now overrun by homelessness, while taxpayers complain about needles and feces in the city sidewalks. Protesters, angry that oil companies have accounts at Chase Bank, managed to erect giant teepees in the middle of downtown Seattle streets. Not only were they left alone long enough to put them up, they remained in place for 5 hours before they were removed. While the city may not be cracking down on drug use or protesters blocking the street, they are taking job creators seriously, slapping them with a $275 per person fine for having the audacity to give someone a job. Only days later, they followed that up with a decision to put a property tax increase on the ballot this November. And this was just in the last week. Last year, the city council made it illegal for landlords to screen rental applications based on criminal records. Not only are criminals not being arrested for engaging in illegal conduct out in the open, but the council wants to require you to rent your property to them, even if you also live there. Maybe watching all of this up close was part of the reason I wasn't shocked when I read a Reuters poll indicating that on a generic ballot, voters prefer Republicans to Democrats. And in one sense, this is really surprising. Voters who said they intended to vote for Democrats fell from 45.5% in November to 34.5% now. Now, Real Clear Politics, which aggregates polls asking the same question, found that Democrats still maintain a 4-point advantage, but that is down from a 12.9-point lead in November. In other words, voters aren't troubled by Republicans as much as they were. Now, we've been hearing for a year and a half about the blue wave that is about to sweep the country. Not just because midterm elections typically work against the party that just won the White House, but because we are also supposed to know that Donald Trump is a giant millstone around the necks of every Republican candidate. The wave is inevitable. He's a terrible, horrible, really bad guy, and collusion. Meanwhile, the president has been doing what he said he was going to do in the way only he can, or would. He got out of the Iran deal, appointed Justice Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, made progress with North Korea, including freeing American hostages, cut almost everyone's taxes, got rid of the individual mandate in Obamacare, stopped the federal government from forcing nuns to pay for abortion, stopped the federal government from forcing schools to allow boys in the women's locker room, reinstated the Mexico City policy to make sure that America isn't sending money around the world to pay for abortions, and cut funding from Planned Parenthood when Congress wouldn't. And he superintended a decline in the jobless rate, as well as a 5,000-point rise in the Dow. And he called Kim Jong-un a little fat man on Twitter. So there's that. And at the same time, Seattle has been doing what it does in the way only it can or would. And in doing so, they're giving voters who care to look a valuable comparison in contrast. You see, Seattle is what happens when progressives get everything that they want exactly like they want it. See, in Seattle, there aren't even any elected Republicans to mock or blame for obstruction. In Seattle, elected officials brag about the fact that they have no Republican friends, and they get cheered when they do so. In Seattle, the only competition on the ballot is between the far left and the far, far left. Now, for the left, Seattle is the dream. But now, that dream has developed some scary clowns and guys with chainsaws. You may not love the tweeting, but you can turn off Twitter. You can't turn off $275 a head and needles in the street. Now, Obama's presidency couldn't help but be disappointing, simply because the expectations were so unrealistic. Is it possible that the expectations for Trump mean he'll inevitably be a pleasant surprise? The polls say maybe. Now, whatever the reason, the big blue wave is starting to feel inevitable in exactly the same way Hillary's election was inevitable. Sure, the left is gonna hate Trump because that's what they do. Middle America, however, doesn't really hate or love people. They just decide elections by voting their self-interest. And this November, as they evaluate their options, some of them may end up asking themselves if they want more Trump or more Seattle? Then we'll find out who really has a millstone around their neck. For the Family Policy Institute of Washington, I'm Joseph Backholm.